Welcome, everyone. It's great to see everyone in this new space that we have. We're so fortunate to be able to have it in the interim. The summary for today is the Florence Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, this is who we are, is pleased to have Reverend Dennis Reynolds return this Sunday for his special message titled, Stories from Our Universalist Forefathers. As Reynolds explains, some say our name, Unitarian Universalist, is too long, so they shorten it to Unitarian. This unfortunately leaves out what is to many, including me, the most significant part of our theological message. The messages we receive from our Universalist forebearers. They gifted us with tales of love and faith that bear repeating. Let's take time to ponder some stories from the early voices of American Universalism. Welcome, everyone. My name is Catherine Hemmons, and I welcome you to this fellowship where we take pride in honoring the first people of Florence, the Siuslaw Indians, who strive to protect our environment, this land we stand on right now, where we are here today. And we give thanks to the tribe, past, present, and future generations, and may we do the same for this land to the best of our ability. I now ask you to all rise, as we do every Sunday, and sing the hymn, Spirit of Life. The words are in your service if you don't know them, and they'll be led by Jeff Lovejoy.
Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice, roots hold me close, wings set me free, Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Thank you, Jeff. We have quite a few announcements today, or just kind of directions, I guess. First of all, please check your cell phones. I heard a couple of them go off just as we were getting ready to sit down and start. So just a little, just so they don't get in the recording or, in the middle of our talks. Please remember to remain fully masked while you're in the senior center, unless you're up here at the podium, okay? If you're new to this facility, the restrooms are located in the back and to the right. And when service is complete, please leave the music sheets at the table because we will use them again. In your program, you'll see that Dr. Gene Trott will be hosting his Connect with Your Soul meditation class on June 7th at 5:15. It says details will be forthcoming in our newsletter, so you will have to look that up. June 8th at 3:30 is our board meeting, and all are welcome. It will be in person at the library in the conference room. Now, Deborah, are there two conference rooms, or?
There's just one.
Just one, okay. So as you go in.
Right now, when you walk in, just go straight to the far wall, and it's on the left.
Okay, okay. So as we walk in, you go straight to the far wall, and it's to the left, Okay, thank you, Deborah, for making sure we have a place for our meeting. Our guest today, Reverend Reynolds, will be available for dialogue circle in the back of the church. And after service, I'll be available for affirmative prayer, or if someone just needs to talk to someone personally in this back room behind me to the right. Also, our annual meeting, our annual business meeting will begin at 11:30, and everyone is welcome to stay, or anyone is welcome to stay. Our members will be voting on the elections, next year's budget, and all regular attendees will vote on our upcoming community partners. Most of you have got ballots, and you sent them in already, so we will talk about the results. Are there any other announcements before I continue? Okay. We're also organized today here. Special thanks to Ray and Judy for being greeters this morning, for stepping up at the last minute. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Do we have anyone here for the first time? Okay. Would you mind rising and just saying your name?
Lydia Swagger.
Okay. Welcome. All right. Thank you. We're always happy to have new people, and we have a small gift for you. This is a gift of haiku that one of our congregants did write herself, so we enjoy them and pass them on to any new members. Let's see. I invite Jay, since he's closest actually, to come up and light the chalice. The chalice. Yes, let's light up. As I share these words from Rebecca Parker, even when our hearts are broken by our own failure or the failure of others cutting into our lives, even when we have done all we can and life is still broken, there is a universal love that has never broken faith with us and never will. I'm going to go right into joys and concerns, which is my usual way of being up here. And this is the time we share what is important to us, where we found blessings in our lives this week, and where we had our difficulties and would like support. Anyone?
So this is half concern, half announcement. Foodshare is really struggling with its volunteer situation right now. We have there's lots of opportunities in Foodshare to walk, to interact with clients, to help behind the desk. What I want to kind of especially pitch to you all perhaps today is if you're not super mobile, if you don't feel like strong enough to stock shelves and stuff like that, but you're okay on a computer, we really need folks who can just sit at the desk and welcome people and get basic data from them. So if you have any interest at all, I'm just asking you to please consider Foodshare. Thanks.
Judy, drop a shelf for me, please. And I'm going to take it off just a little. I'm in Lakeland, and I want to acknowledge the people from this fellowship who are working day after day after day, hard physical labor to make our new home a reality. I drove by last week on my way, and I saw the door open. And I went in, and George was there. And George, I didn't recognize any of you. He had 2 or 3 other men there working. And I just had no idea of the sheer vastness of the physical work that's being done. They're tearing down the walls and rebuilding the bathrooms. We're going to have quieter toilets and quieter bathrooms so we can go in the middle of the service. Well, that's important. And I want to ask anybody here right now, in addition to George, who has been doing physical work, please stand and let us acknowledge you. Don't be bashful. everywhere, and everything they're knocking down, and they haven't even started rebuilding, so thank you.
Thank you, Ann. We actually have started rebuilding a little bit, so it's on schedule.
It's amazing.
One more shell. Helen?
I'm just gonna sit back here and yell. I wanted to thank those who responded to my plea for a ride. And I got one, and this person is enthusiastic, and she used to do this for a living, so I trust her. So anyway, that's covered.
That's great. I'm glad you got a positive response there. Thank you, Helen. And that last shell I put in was for everyone that we don't know about. Everyone that's sitting home feels a little bit too weak or just not able to drive here. For anyone sitting home that's just lonely or anxious. And for those who are somewhere having incredible joy and they're thinking of us here right now. I'd like to end with a quote. This is my favorite quote recently, attributed to Ramana Maharshi. In our lives, we are the actor on the stage by our actions. We are the director by our choice. And we are the audience with our awareness of all of it. And it's happening all at the same time. And so it is. Let's see here. What do I... Oh, I kind of lost my way here. One second. We'll go to the opening hymn right now from Jeff Lovejoy. You have the music in front of you. We would be one. Please rise if you are able.
We got it. Now we'll go into our responsive reading. Love, which is the most difficult mystery, asking from every young one answers, and asking most from those most eager and most beautiful.
Love is a bird in a fist, To hold it, it hides it. To look at it, lets it go.
It will twist loose if you lift so much as a finger, and if it will stay if you cover it. Stay, but unknown and invisible.
Either you keep it forever with fists closed, or let it fling.
Singing in fervor of sun and in song vanish. There is no answer other to this mystery. Let me introduce Reverend Dennis Reynolds. Most of you have seen him. He's spoken here several times from Eugene. His kind, steady presence is welcomed here.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you all for, coming out on this drizzly, we thought it was summer kind of day. I'm camping for the next couple of nights, and I'm glad I'm camping in my van. But I'm, a native Oregonian, so I know the reality of being on the coast in June is what it is, and that's why it's so green most of the year. That whole notion of mystery, it's really at the core of who we are and what we do as Unitarian Universalists, is to explore the mystery. Now, our tradition is rooted in two different but closely aligned religious faiths: Unitarian and Universalist. The two traditions had long had much in common, and in 1961, they merged to become one faith that previously had been the Unitarian Universalist Association, and the Universalist Church of America merged to become the Unitarian Universalist Association. That hymn that we just sang, "We Would Be One," was written to honor that merger. And it was written by someone who had experienced part of the merger earlier, a young writer who had been part of a shared youth group that came when Unitarian and Universalist collaborated at a youth group called Liberal Religious Youth, LRY. How many LRYers in the crowd here, right? I'm one. I was part of the LRY chapter in Salem in the 60s and into the 70s. And like in many other things, the youth led us to coming together. That's how the two faiths began to become one. And it was back then, in 1961, when all of a sudden we became Unitarian Universalists. I call it the church with the too long name, right? And it's like, particularly when you have things like the Florence Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, which is a lot longer than saying church, or a Catholic church, or Baptist church, or lots of tighter names that some other traditions have. It can be a mouthful, so often we abbreviate it and we just call ourselves UU. And I want to share with you a little thing I learned from a director of religious exploration. I want to do it once and then I want you to do it with me. We are UU. Let's try it together, actually. We are UU. The Church of the Open Mind. The loving heart. And the caring hand. I think it's a pretty good summary of who we strive to be as UU. And UU does shorten it and it makes it simpler, but it's often off-putting to outsiders. I mean, we explain to people, well, do you go to church? And go, yeah, I go to the UU church. And they go, the what? The UU? Is that like the me church? So the problem isn't so easy that way. And so often people just shorten it. What's your faith tradition? What church do you go to or fellowship do you gather at? I'm a Unitarian. Problem solved, right? Simple, easy. Well, yes, but not exactly. For some of us, Universalist theology and a Universalist mind and heart set are more central to our belief than what is that which is called Unitarianism. I am one of those who use the word Unitarian to describe what kind of Universalist I am. So dropping the first word, if I was going to drop a word, I would drop Unitarian. And people go, I'm a Universalist, what's that all about? Well, hopefully at the end of this morning, you'll have more of a notion, at least from the historical perspective, of what that's all about. And why I think it's important, even though it's a little bit longer and takes us another moment to use both names. I also will admit to you a little thing I have with the UUA in Boston. When they rebranded us and created a new image of the chalice, that's the chalice with all those flames coming out of it, and they let go of the two circles, the older version. Well, those two circles came from the Universalist Church in America that then was merged with the Unitarian chalice. I think we lose something when we forget our history and all that we have been. Now, historically, both Unitarianism and Universalism were Christian denominations. The word Unitarian comes from rejection of the notion of Trinitarianism, which is the Christian teaching that divinity is divided into three parts: Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Okay? Unitarians came to the view that this three-part manifestation of the Godhead made no sense. They reviewed Scripture and they could see no justification for it even in the book. Some describe these people as anti-Trinitarians, and they were considered heretics. There was a Trinitarian Unitarian conflict in our own history back in Massachusetts in colonial days. But even earlier than that, Michael Servetus, or his Spanish name would have expressed it, Miguel Servat, was an early proponent of these Unitarian views, emphasizing that he had used reason and an open mind to come to his viewpoint. The Spanish Inquisition did not take kindly to his position, nor did the then emerging Protestant church, and he was declared a heretic. And at the behest of John Calvin, burned at the stake in Geneva in 1553. And to make sure that he got the point, they strapped copies of his writings to his legs to help the fire burn. Right? That's the price you paid for openly being a Unitarian in 1553. A Baptist colleague who I met when I was part of a ministers group in Port Townsend, Washington, described our overlapping histories as such. He said, our founder had your founder burned at the stake. Fortunately, pure Calvinism and pure Unitarianism have changed over the last 450 plus years. Yet central to our theology then and now is the primacy of reason, as exemplified in our principle promoting a free and open search for truth and meaning. We're the people of the open mind. Universalism, the name for the other side of the family tree, comes from the concept of universal salvation, meaning that no person, no matter what, will be condemned to hellfire and damnation, because all will be saved. Forgiveness and God's love are universal. They're there for everyone. And I have to acknowledge, I was raised in a fundamentalist church. I was raised Nazarene, which is why I am so adamantly Universalist, because I spent too many years being told I was going to burn. And to embrace a faith, we're saying, no. You know, I don't have to hold on to that fear anymore. There is a pathway to truly letting it go. And Universalism and some years of therapy have helped me get over it. Now, you know, some trace this version of Christian thought back to the early Christian church, and in particular to Origen. a noted theologian of the 2nd century in Christian history. He wrote extensively, but especially on notions of universal salvation. In time, though, notions of universal salvation were deemed as many settings as heretical. Those kinds of writings were taken out and not included in Scripture at the Council of Nicaea in the 323, 325. They had several councils. I don't know at which point they declared Origenism heretical, but it was around that time. And even in more moderate churches more recently, such notions are considered on the fringe of good theology. In spite, though, of centuries of suppression, the idea and belief in a loving God that would condemn no one has persisted and resurfaced from time to time. In England in the 18th century, the nation gained some traction, and the idea of universal salvation gained new adherents. And for today's purpose, most notably amongst them, a man named John Murray. Now, proclaiming himself a universalist and sharing such a doctrine did not play out well for John Murray. He was excommunicated from the church of the time for his beliefs. And then he went through a very challenging and difficult time in his life. His wife and their son became sick, and they both died. He lost his job, and his finances were greatly reduced. At one point, he reportedly was imprisoned for his inability to pay his debts. John Murray did as other previously religiously persecuted people had done before him. He decided to try to make a fresh start in America. So in 1770, he managed to put together enough funding for a ticket to the colonies on a ship called the Hand in Hand. The cross-Atlantic sailing went smoothly until they neared New York Harbor. Then a fog surrounded the ship, and they ran aground on a sandbar on the New Jersey shore. The captain of the ship hoped that, the next tide, perhaps they would be able to get the Hand in Hand off the bar and they could resume their journey. Murray went ashore. There he spied a farmhouse, which was the home of a man named Thomas Potter. Potter invited the stranded Murray to dinner and a tour of his farm. He showed Murray with considerable pride a small chapel he had built on his property. In the after-dinner conversation, Murray shared a bit about himself, and Potter talked about his belief in a loving God who wanted all people to be saved. John Murray acknowledged that he shared such a viewpoint and even preached such a message in English churches, where he acknowledged it had not always gone over so well. Potter told Murray that he had built that little chapel hoping and praying that a minister would come and preach there. The next morning was Sunday. So Potter urged Murray to preach in his chapel. Murray declined, saying, no, I'm going to New York on the next tide. Or so he hoped. Potter persisted, and eventually Murray relented with the condition that if the morning tide freed the stranded ship, he would sail on and continue his journey. And if not, well, okay, he'd preach. Guess what happened? That night the tide did come in, but alas, not enough to free the ship. So early on Sunday morning, Potter rode out around the neighboring farms and rounded up folks to hear the preacher who had been delivered to them. Well, here in America on that Sunday in the Jersey Shore, the message went really well. The gathered congregation loved Murray's message of universal love. The universalist message, the power of love in one's relationship with the divine and with each other, that Murray shared was good news to all those who heard him preach it. It seems Murray now had a church and a congregation. He served there in the chapel on the Jersey Shore from 1770 until 1774. In 1775, General George Washington appointed Murray to be a chaplain to the Continental Army. Later, he served a church in Gloucester, Massachusetts for many years and spent time, as many preachers did back in those days, traveling to different churches in different towns and villages. You know, some of us still do that. Murray participated in the first General Universalist Convention in Oxford, Massachusetts in 1785, and in 1793 became pastor of the Universalist Society of Boston, a fairly good-sized church, and faithfully served there until 1809. Now, many credit John Murray with being one of the chief founders of American Universalism. And it's kind of miraculous how that particular seed was planted on our shores. Another itinerant Universalist preacher of the early days in America was Hosea Ballou. And Ballou was raised in a strong Baptist family. He knew his Bible, and though not highly educated, he came to the belief through both study and prayer in how a loving God would not condemn anyone to hell. Such love offered to all of us an example of how we might love one another. He not only had such beliefs, Ballou went out on the road to share them. He traveled from town to town sharing his good news and then passing the plate. He earned a meager living. Now, when I hear about such preachers, I'm reminded of a statue on the Oregon Capitol grounds in Salem. It's called the Circuit Rider. Does anybody see it or remember seeing it? Well, it's there on the Capitol grounds, so look for it next time you're in Salem. It depicts in bronze a lonely figure on a horse, seemingly leaning into a harsh wind with all his belongings in his saddlebag and a copy of the Bible tucked under his arm. I'm impressed by such dedication. Though I travel from town to town and preach, I drive a minivan with a bed in the back. Anyway, there is a story or two about Ballou I'd like to share with you this morning. Ballou had preached in a small village, and after he preached, he passed the plate and got a few coins, but he also got an invitation to supper and a place to stay for a farmer who lived just a short distance out of town. It was a hearty meal, and after dinner, the farmer and Ballou sat around talking about many things, including what to the farmer was this new notion of salvation for all, no matter their transgressions. As it grew late, the farmer walked with Ballou out to the barn where a pile of soft hay would serve as the circuit rider's bed for the night. "Pastor," the farmer said, "I'm afraid to say you will likely be woken up during the night when my son comes in from town. You see, he's fallen from the way, and most nights he goes into town drinking and carousing and carrying on and doing heaven knows what. And when he comes home, he's rarely quiet. I don't know what to do. I love him, but I'm at my wit's end." "Well, friends," said Ballou, "I have an idea of how we might teach your son a lesson and perhaps reform him. Here's the plan. I noticed a place on the road from the town where there's a big hill next to the road. Let's the two of us ride out there and build a big fire behind that hill. Then, when your son is coming from town, you rush out and stop him, and I'll come and help you, and we'll pull him down off his horse, we'll drag him behind the hill, and we'll throw him on that fire. That'll teach him." The farmer was flabbergasted. "But Pastor, I wouldn't throw my own son into the fire, no matter what he may have done. I love my son." Ballou paused for a moment and said to the farmer, "Of course you do. And so it is with the Holy Father. He loves all his children and would never condemn any of them to hellfire, no matter what. The farmer nodded in confirmation, his heart changed by his new understanding of such a concept of divine love, a divine that will never let us go, no matter what. There's another story I've heard about Ballou from his circuit rider days. In this tale, it seems that Ballou had encountered on his travel a fellow itinerant preacher of Baptists, who, though he lived a very similar lifestyle to Ballou's, he embraced and preached a very different message, one which assured sinners that God would punish them for all eternity if they did not set aside their evil ways. The two men chose to camp together by a gentle stream. They enjoyed each other's company, for the life of a traveling preacher can be a lonely one. The two preachers were gathered by the fire after a shared meal, talking in the ways that preachers do about congregational dynamics and polity and theology and all that stuff that we preachers talk about when we sit down with other preachers. The Baptist was having a hard time accepting Ballou's deep belief in the primacy of love and how a loving God would not offer eternal punishment for one's sins. Pastor Ballou, I understand all about Jesus' message of love, but if, as you say, there is no divine punishment, what would stop me from just bashing you over the head while you're sleeping and taking your horse and all your possessions and riding off into the night? Friend, answered Ballou, if you truly believed in the power of love, such a thought would have never have entered your heart nor your mind. Ballou believed deeply in the power of such love, and he preached about it and he wrote about it, most notably in a piece called The Treatise on Atonement. It's reportedly he lovingly rewrote the treatise several times as his theology continued to evolve and change. Sounds like you thinking to me. We come to a place we believe and then we explore more deeply and our beliefs change somewhat. Still grounded in that primacy of love, but the nuances for Ballou change. And so he rewrote the treatise reportedly up to 9 times. I'm not sure how many actually made it to published version, but it was changed. That's the part, though, that remained unchanged was his belief in the power of love. Universal love between humanity and the divine, however one might define that sense of divinity, and between our fellow humans, is the core belief of universalism. The reality of universalist love is no way shaped by whether one is a theist or an atheist. We share that as a common belief in the power of love. We are you, the people of the loving heart. My first teaching from a Universalist minister were from the Reverend Carolyn Colbert. Reverend Colbert was my minister, my friend, and my mentor. She served the Eugene congregation as minister for 9 years, and I'm proud to say was my friend till near the end of her life, a much longer time. Carolyn's father and her mother were both ordained in the years before merger as Universalist clergy. Her father served as staff to the American Universalist Association, and after the merger taught at Starr King School for the ministry. Her mother was one of the few women of that generation ordained as clergy. She served as a community minister committed to social work. Reverend Carolyn, a birthright Universalist, would begin many a Sunday service with these words: "We are loving and caring people, but sometimes we forget. We come together in religious community to remember. To remember. We come together to remember the fundamental truth that we are held with love and we are called by that love to work toward a better world and offer care and loving compassion to all, no matter what. May that divine love shine on you and shine through you out into a bruised and hurting world. For we are, let's do it together, you, the people of the open mind, the loving heart, and the helping hand. May it always be so. And we will invite you to rise in body or in spirit for our next hymn, We'll Build the Bank.
Thank you very much, Reverend Reynolds. I learned a lot today. Appreciate it. And thank you, Jeff, for that beautiful hymn. Our community partner for June is Friends of Florence, affectionately known as the Band Fans. Ron Pressler would like to share a few words about this critical community service.
I'm going to try this with a mask. Can you hear me, folks?
We can.
A few years ago, I had prostate cancer, and the treatment prescribed was 45 days of radiation. Thank you, Jim. 45 days pretty much consecutively. They gave us weekends off. I don't think I could have made that schedule, having to drive to Springfield every day. But the band fans they have a bus that goes to the hospital here and will take you to Springfield, and then the Cancer Institute in Eugene on the same route. And typically there were 6 or 8 people on that bus. And you get to know people when you're together with them now. So it became like a small family. The drivers and all the people involved are volunteers. They raise money for the buses, they raise money for gas. They're well-trained. They certainly drive a whole lot better than I would. And I was lucky in some respects. My treatment wasn't painful. It wasn't debilitating. But the folks who had to go to the Cancer Institute, you could see the difference when they got back on the bus after their treatment. They really had it tough. And that bus service was a blessing to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. And I know there are others in this community that have also had the gift of this van fan. Generosity is one of the spiritual values we recognize as central to our personal and institutional well-being. You are now invited to participate in the blessing of giving. Please remember that all our lives we are in need and others are in need of us. If you're watching this virtually and you'd like to contribute, our mailing address is P.O. Box 2502. I'll bring the basket around to each table to accept the gifts of this congregation. One side is for FOOF and one side is for the band, the cancer band. If you're unable to contribute today, please offer your silent prayer of thanks. I'll be coming around and, before we enjoy this music provided by Jeff, please repeat after me. Divine love through me.
Divine love through me.
Blesses and multiplies all that I am.
Blesses and multiplies all that I am.
All that I give.
All that I give.
And all that I receive.
All that I receive.
I am prosperous now.
I am prosperous now.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Oh, that was a great Oh, Sally will be so happy.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you all for your patience. We thank you for your spiritual practice of giving and loving. Your contributions and love are received in grateful appreciation. I'll ask Jay to come up and please extinguish the chalice. While I share these closing words from Elizabeth Jones, we extinguish this flame, but not our light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of contentment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. We will finish with the benediction. Reverend Dennis.
The closing words of benediction this morning are from John Murray. Go out into the highways and byways. Give the people something of your vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it and let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of all people. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God. Shalom, shalom, amen, and blessed be.
Thank you again for that. Before we sing our peace song, remember to join Dennis in the back of the room with a couple of tables. And I'll be available to anyone who wants affirmative prayer in the back room. Now please, let's make a circle around all the tables. Join hands or arms or elbows, or however you're comfortable, and we'll sing the peace song.